A really common question that I've been seeing a lot with fishing is what's the best purple and orange script farm? In Endwalker, Fisher had by and far the best script farm, specifically for white script, which would be the equivalent of purple script right now in Dawntrail, and that was Fleeting Brand. It was ridiculously high rates of basically just script per hour. It was very easy to execute, and it was just in general like a pretty chill farm with very high rewards. And so a lot of people are expecting that also going into Dawntrail. But things are so far kind of mellowed out from what we can tell. So what I wanted to talk about a little bit today is just fishing collectibles. Why, whenever somebody asks what's the best script farm for Fisher, the answer is usually, and just generally how fishing collectibles work, because it is different than botany and minor. And if you are coming from botany and minor, then you're going to want to be a little familiar with this. So fishing collectibles work a little bit differently than the current botany and minor. And I say the current botany and minor collectibles because they used to all work very similarly. Some time ago, there was a change to how they did collectibles, and it only applied to botany and minor. So now all their collectibles are on a scale of 0 to 1,000, whereas fish remain unchanged. And the way that a fish's collectability is determined is based on its size. So it is basically the size of the fish times 10. So basically just move the decimal place over one spot to the right, and congrats, you have the collectability. And in order to actually catch a collectible fish, one, the fish needs to be tagged as collectible, and two, you need to have the collector's glove buff, which you use collect to enable. And this is basically the old way of how collectibles used to work with botany and minor. But with these collectibles, you now have a chance. Well, I say have a chance, but now anytime you collect a collectible fish, it's able to be turned in. This used to not be the case, especially before, I believe it was Endwalker, when they made that change, and which is why I think the scripts in Endwalker were so, I mean, to put it bluntly, cracked. That was ridiculous. It was very, very ridiculous that Fleeting Brand and Kitefin Shark were as good as they were. And I think that was all due in part to the fact that now, whenever you catch a collectible fish, there is no minimum that you need to reach to be able to turn it in. Any size, anytime you catch a collectible fish, you can turn it in now. And so as you're fishing, you can just, it doesn't matter if you have patience active or prize catch, and you can just fish for it now. And this is why I think we saw a ton of bots at Fleeting Brand during Endwalker. But anyways, digress a little bit farther down, going back to how collectibles work. So in order to catch collectible fish, you use collect, and when you catch it, you will get the prompt saying, do you want to gather this as a collectible? If you press yes, you get it as a collectible. If you press no, you don't, which is actually kind of handy. If you've ever tried to go for Stethacanthus, we have something called the Collector's Glove holding trick, where a Sculptor is a collectible fish, and if you just double hook a collectible fish while collect is active, you will get the prompt saying, do you want to collect this fish as a collectible? If you press yes, you will get one collectible. Doesn't matter if you use double hook, doesn't matter if you use triple hook, you will always get one. However, if you press no, you will get 2. So this is how we are basically able to trigger the Stethecanthus intuition whenever we want, because once we get a sculptor, we always go for it with collector's glove on, and we just wait until an opportune time to go for Stethecanthus, and we press no. And then we get 2 sculptors. That gives us the intuition, and then we can catch, and then we can go for Stethecanthus. So the thing with collectibles is, with fishing collectibles is that they're not just like a thing that we use to turn in for Scrip. We actually have mechanics and tricks that we use to catch fish around them. So the way that it currently works is kind of important for some fish, and if they actually changed it, it would potentially make some fish harder. There would be buffs to specific fish. So that's kind of like in a nutshell how fishing collectibles work. I do have a guide on this on my channel that you can go and look and get a little bit more information on. But the main thing that you need to know for the rest of this conversation is that there are no minimums for collectible fish. Anytime you catch a collectible fish, you can turn it in. It is basically a matter of how collectible is it. That will determine how many scripts you actually get. So if we do go into collectible, like the actual script fish, there's 3 kind of genres of fish. The always up, like low value script fish, the conditionally up, medium high value fish, and then like what you maybe want to consider like the common big fish, or like the common tier big fish, which usually has the super high return. Those are the ones that you see with like 1,000 or 1,500 script. So always up low value script, in Dawntrail we see that with the Zorgor Condor, Gold Grouper, maybe Cloud Wasp. Those the ones that you can kind of just always go to. They have okay returns. They're not going to be like amazingly great, but they're pretty good for being always up. These are, I think, like in Shadowbringers, we had like Pancake Octopus. Fleeting Brand is a bit of an outlier because it was so high, and I think that was partially because they just introduced the fact that any collectible fish can now be turned in. So now there was no minimum, there was no like barrier that you needed to achieve, like to get over to be able to turn in collectibles. And I think that kind of skewed a lot of the always up looking fish. I know a lot of people were like, hey, is there a Fleeting Brand or a Kitefin Shark for Dawntrail? Looking for that always up high value fish. And again, I don't know. We're still trying to figure that out, and I'll talk about that in a minute. The conditionally up medium high fish. In Endwalker, those did exist, but again, they kind of got washed out by Kitefin Shark and by Fleeting Brand. But in Dawntrail, the conditionally up fish that's like really high value is Copper Shark. That's the one that I still don't have numbers on. I've been personally testing some numbers. I know other people are as well. But we don't have enough data yet to really say this is the theoretical hourly rates for that specific orange script farm. But Copper Shark, if it's up, go for it. Like 100%. You drop anything else that you're going for and you go there and go for them. So like that's a good example of a conditionally up medium high return fish. And then there's the super rare common fish, which there's at least one of per expansion. In Heaven's Ward, it was Barrel Eye. In Stormblood, it was the infamous Sculptors. In Shadowbringers, it was Apoak. In Endwalker, it was the even more infamous Felania. And in Dawntrail, we have sort of like, I feel like there's 2 really. The primary one is chain shark, which is worth 1,000 orange scrip at tier 3, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then there's yellow peacock bass, which I wanted to point out because it's a high value orange scrip fish. It has a very small window. It's like an hour long. It's a mooch fish, and it's just an interesting fish that they added. And it's not necessarily terrible to go for. Like, there's definitely gonna be windows where you won't get them because it's only an hour long. That's like 3 minutes of real life time. But you definitely can find value in that if you just show up, get your 3 dumpling fish, and then just burn the pocket. Like, just burn out your pocket swim bait there and just and just use them all. And that takes you about a minute, maybe less than a minute. And if you don't get it, cool. You go away, you come back for the next window if you want. You can stay for the rest of it and you can get a couple more mooches in, but that one's worth almost 500 scrip at tier 3. So I don't really think we've seen this. Like, chain shark feels kind of like almost a Philania and almost a sculptor, but if you look at chain shark and yellow peacock bass together, they definitely form like one Philania or one sculptor or one apoac. So I think that's really interesting that they kind of split it up into 2. And I've seen a lot of people will look at those fish and go, oh, they're really high value fish. We got to go for them like all the time. And I know that there is at least one guide out there that recommends that you go for both consistently. And I don't really agree with that. I think yellow peacock bass, if you feel like going for it, I would. I don't know if it's worth it yet. I would say with some confidence, chain shark is not worth it. You go for chain shark if you feel like it and if you want to have fun, but I don't think it would be part of like a Eorzean day rotation. I don't think you really get enough of a return on that for the amount of time that you have to put in to be able to actually optimally get your chances at chain shark. And I keep talking about we're not too sure what's actually good yet. And that's because there's been a lot in Dawntrail. In my last ramble video, I talked about how Dawntrail was like the best update for fishing ever, and I still believe that. And a byproduct of that, though, is there's a lot of variables now. Like, we have to look at a bunch of different methodologies for having to catch fish. I think I've personally been testing Cloud Wasp, and I think I've gone through 3 or 4 different methodologies of just testing how to catch Cloud Wasp efficiently, and which one's going to make it easy, which one is going to make it have the best return, which one has the increased chances, like which one's the most efficient. And there's so many different moving parts now, and not a whole lot of people are actually testing. There's like I said, I'm testing just Cloud Wasp and might move over into Condor a little bit, despite the fact that I've already made a guide on Condor, but I want to get some numbers. But in reality, I can really only think of 1, maybe 2 other people who are actively and scientifically recording how many they're catching over a certain amount of time to figure out which one is truly the best. And it's going to take time to figure this out because of all of these variables that we have. So if you were hoping that I was going to say, well, here's the best Scrip farms, still don't know. To highlight that even further, Teodo Teyun is still working on Scrip farms. They are one of the people, if not potentially one of the only people who are doing this. And also the author of the Scrip farming guide for fishing on TC Guides, which I will link in the description. They're still trying to figure out like purple Scrip farms, and that had a very interesting change where, we Fleeting Brand and Kitefin Shark, we have been recommending that since Dawntrail launch as a okay, still fine purple Scrip farm. But we never said it was the best. And if you look at all of my guides, I will never say that this is the best farm until I have the numbers to prove it. And there was some interesting updates with the purple Scrip farm because of the level 100 skills, Ambitious and Modest Slayer, and some of the fish in previous expansions are now viable farms for purple Scrip. Potentially, and I say this potentially, I know I'm being a little wishy-washy with this, potentially beating out Fleeting Brand and beating out Kitefin Shark. Like, a lot. And that's not to say that there's no Dawntrail fish that are good, like Moxaturali Gar. That's a good fish to go for. The issue with that one, though, is that it's not as simple to go for as, say, Fleeting Brand. So it's a little bit harder to actually explain. I don't even think I will be doing a guide on it, not because it is hard or difficult to do. I mean, you're going to be using every skill that you have to be able to properly catch Moxaturali Gar. I just don't think I'll be making a guide on it because I don't know if I'm willing to recommend it to the average fisher. And that's fine. I'm okay with that. I think that this is actually great that we finally have some stuff where if you really want to put that skill in and put your knowledge to the test, put your skills to the test and really fish for those fish efficiently for these Scrip fish and get rewarded for it, that is awesome. I think that is great. And I think with Moxaturali Gar, there is a unique thing about Gar and how the collectibles are set up, where the tier 3 is like a very high threshold to get. You need to have a relatively large size. You really do want to be pushing big game fishing. You do want to be consistently using Patience 2 and Prize Catch to be able to get those large size fish. And you really need to be well geared to be able to get those perception, to be able to get into tier 3. And because there is this, because it is a tier 3, which at current gear, if you're just using normal Scrip gear on pentamelded, you're not going to be getting those tier 3s as often. But if you're pentamelded, you're going to be getting tier 3 even more often. And there's a few fish like this, I believe, off the top of my head, I should have written this down, but I know Chain Shark is similar to this, where you have a very high threshold in order to get the tier 3, and there's a big jump in number of Scripts that you get from tier 2 to tier 3. Moxaturali Gar, Cloud Wasp, I think, is also like that. However, it is not as, in my experience, it hasn't been as unforgiving at lower gear. But because there is now this kind of gear influence on the return rates of Script for some of these fish, I'm interested to see if, say, Moxaturali Gar, which right now requires pretty good, decent gear. I'm not going to say perfectly melded, but you need decent gear for Moxaturali Gar in order to be efficiently farming that. You need to be using the skills consistently to be able to keep getting those tier 3 fish over and over and over again, and be able to push them. I'm wondering if we're going to see, as the game progresses and our gear gets better, the baseline perception that everybody has, even on Scrip gear, gets higher. I'm actually wondering if we're going to see Moxaturali become easier. You're going to become more consistently able to get the tier 3 Gar without needing to work as hard. And this is a type of progression, expansion progression, that we haven't yet seen before with collectibles and with fishing. I think that I'm kind of excited to see if this actually pans out, because if it is, it's great, because it'll apply to Gar, it'll apply to Chain Shark, it'll apply to, again, like I said, I believe Cloud Wasp, and all these other number of Scrip fish. that by maybe 7.1, when we get our new left side gear and our base perception goes up a little bit, it might be even easier to get Moxitral Gar at tier 3, and you're going to be more consistently, the average player will be more consistently getting those tier 3, which will make it more efficient for the average player, and thus easier to actually recommend. And then maybe by 7.3, when we get our full final end game best in slot gear, at that point, that might become the best or the recommended way of getting it purple Scrip, because it is our gear may be so strong, or at least our perception will be so high, that tier 3 is going to be the commonplace. We're not going to have to be dealing with like super efficient use. You don't have to be really sweaty, I guess, as much as I hate to use that term. Really focused and sweaty and consistently getting that tier 3 GAR, and thus the floor of, like, the skill floor in order to actually get the efficient rates from Moxitral Gar will go down as the game progresses and our gear progresses. And I think that it would actually be really cool. I think that would be genuinely exciting, and that there would actually be gear progression, and that perception would, matter a bit more than it has in the past. So I think that's something to really be looking forward to with fishing, and I think that's one of the many things that we're going to be seeing, that I'm going to be looking for, at least, with fishing as we move through Dawntrail, is this now progression that they've sort of started to set up of the higher your gear, the better the script. So maybe when the script recommendations come out, which I don't know when that'll be, when the script farm recommendations come out, maybe we have to look at them again in 7.3 and see, oh, it's a whole lot easier to get Gar now. Maybe we do need to recommend that more than Brand or Kite Fin or the Heavensward fish. Which I kind of just briefly glanced over. Like, these Heavensward fish, they were fine beforehand, but now that we have Modest and Ambitious Lure, we're actually able to really push them, really push these collectible Scrip fish to these big rates. I think one of them is timed, so you only have like 15-20 minutes to catch it, but you were looking at like greater than fleeting Brand numbers per hour spent fishing at this one particular fish, which is I believe Thunderbolt eel. So there's a lot going on with fishing right now, and again, I outlined this a little bit in my last ramble video, but that's why it's taking so long to figure out where all the collectible fish are, which one's best. And this is why whenever someone's asked, what's the best, what's the fastest, we don't know. And anyone who says they know is not working on a lot of data. And that's something else that we have found as people are testing the proc rates of Ambitious and Modest Lure and their effects. They had a small sample size, and it was looking like these were the numbers, and then they added more data, and even the numbers changed because more data came in. It got more refined, and that's what's happening with the script farms right now. And again, because there's so many variables, it's gonna take a little bit longer to figure out, but it will eventually come out. So yeah, honestly, that was kind of all I really wanted to talk about with collectibles right now. There was a lot of people who were asking about them and talking about them, and I felt like I really just kind of wanted to ramble on about them just for a little bit to kind of explain what is going on, why it's taking so long, and what to expect with those moving forward. So kind of in summary, we don't know yet. They're coming. We're testing. It will take time because there's not a lot of people who are actually testing these, and it's just a lot of work. There's a lot of fish to test, and yeah, that's about it. So that's going on, I don't know, like 25 and a half minutes now here on just talking about collectibles. A little bit of a shorter rambler here today because I was doing some other recording for some other stuff. But that's it for now. Good luck and happy fishing.